a yay or good afternoon or something. We'll go from there. Vice Chair Belknap.
Here.
Vice Chair Davis.
Here.
Member Earl is on her way. Member Hanson.
Here.
Thank you. Member Hymas.
Here.
Member Straight.
Here.
Member Lear.
Here.
Member Cannon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon. Member Hart.
Here.
Member Klein.
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Moss. Member Moss. I'm not seeing him on here, but I know he's trying to join us. Member Booth.
I'm here, thank you.
Very good. Member Norton.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Well, we have all of our members present except for two that are trying to get on, I believe, remotely, or will be with us soon. Need to read the statement. And it's as authorized by Utah Code 52.4. This meeting is being held electronically without an anchor location to reduce the risk to health and safety from COVID-19 by limiting the frequency of in-person meetings. So we've got that taken care of. Good afternoon and welcome to our legislative board meeting, February 8th. Want to welcome the board members and then all others that are listening in, and we do have a few others participating. Just to manage everyone's expectations, we're going to try to get through the legislative briefing from Deputy Superintendent Stallings and some questions in that. Try to wrap that up about 1:10, and then Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones will brief us on the funding, and then we'll get right into the any action items. I'm hoping we'll have 45 minutes to deal with our actionable items there. So I hope that helps people with expectations. The first item, or the next item on our agenda, is the approval of meeting minutes. I'm seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the February 11, 2021 meeting.
So moved, Chair Belknap.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Board Member Booth.
Thank you, Member Booth. We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. I'm seeing none. So please vote. I didn't see Member Hanson. Vice Chair Belknap, did you see? It looked like the voting was unanimous.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Chair Huntsman, I just need to verify who is absent.
we still are missing Board Member Earl and Board Member Moss. Okay, next we'll get right into our review of legislation. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, are you ready to get this kicked off?
Yeah, good morning, Chair Huntsman, board members. This is Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent Policy. Our first item today is actually, we have Representative Joel Risco and Dottie Omen, and hopefully I'm saying that correctly, who have joined us to speak to Representative Risco's HB 338. And Ms. Omen has been working with Representative Risco on this bill, and she also happens to be a member of our own Student Advisory Council. So, Chair, if it's all right with you, you may want to just turn the time over to Dottie and Risco.
Okay, Representative Risco and Dottie, are you ready?
I'm happy to be here, but I want her to do the talking. I'm just here to listen and to answer questions. But
Okay.
you definitely need to hear from Ms. Human. Are you
Okay.
with us, Dottie?
Yeah, I'm right here. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's a privilege to be here. So a little bit about me is I'm 16. I serve as the student board member for Salt Lake City School District. I'm a junior at West High School, and I'm also on the SAC for the Utah State Board of Education. So when I was appointed to the board for Salt Lake City School District, I kind of thought about what my mission would be as part of the board, and I decided that my mission would be to leave the board with a larger space for students than when I found it. And HB 338 truly encompasses that mission, and it is the crowning jewel of my time here on the board. So HB 338 is a proposition to create a pathway for local school districts to be able to vote on a measure individually to decide whether or not 16 and 17-year-olds in their district would have the right to vote for their local school board representatives. It's my understanding that Utah has one of the lowest youth voter turnout rates in the nation. In 2018, our youth voter turnout, youth meaning 18 through ages 29, our youth voter turnout was 14%, ranking us second to dead last in the entire United States. I believe that there is no more local election than a local school board race. And I want students to have their voices be heard at a ballot box and also to see the importance of local voting and local races, because it's oftentimes those local elections where you see the biggest impact and the biggest differences. For students especially, local school board races matter the most for them. You know, right now they're deciding whether we're in person or online. They're deciding what curriculums we're learning, and they're deciding what time school starts and what time students wake up. You know, it's my firm belief that students are ready and capable to vote. They have logical decision-making processes, and they have cognitive abilities to make that decision. And so I firmly believe that students deserve the right to vote, and if their local school districts feel like they're ready to do so, then they should have that opportunity. Representative Risco, do you have anything to add, or?
It's important to note, first of all, Dottie did this by herself. She didn't write the bill, but she brought the idea forward. And I've discussed with many people who said 17-year-olds can't do that. And well, you haven't met Dottie. Dottie can do this. And she's an example of what 16 and 17-year-olds can do. This would be permissive. It would not be required. It would require a positive vote of a local school board to allow. Although if no school board in the state of Utah wants to do this, it won't happen. I would never dream of saying that every school board would be required to do. We were asked early, do you want this for state school board elections? It was my opinion that it should not at first, that it should, even though those issues do affect 16 and 17-year-olds, sometimes they can be a little bit one level of abstraction, a little bit above what a local school board does. You might disagree with me, and you're certainly welcome to express that opinion. I thought that as a pilot, it ought to be tried by a school board or two who may want to try it first on a local level, and let's see how students perform and how it functions. So my hat's off to Dottie for leading, being a youth who's concerned and cares. And we do appreciate the time of the state school board. And as a former local school board member, I know several of you, and thank you for your service to all the children and all the people who believe in public education in Utah.
Thank you. Questions for Representative Risco or Dottie? Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you so much. First of all, I appreciate Dottie coming today because it's always hard, first of all, on Zoom, but also to present to a bunch of adults. So I so appreciate that. Second, Representative Risco, have there been any discussion on the logistics of this? How would they receive a ballot? and et cetera, mailing something to a minor. So I'm curious.
That's an excellent question. Good to see you, Laura. I taught some of Laura's kids at Bountiful High, and what fun Bountiful High was. What a great parent Laura was for Bountiful High, for her children and many children. The current plan is that they would be mail ballots like everyone else. Senator Weiler thought it might be a good idea to have them vote in school. And I said, well, Senator, how would that work? He said, well, they'd go down to the office and they'd hand them a ballot. And I went, you haven't been in a school, Senator Weiler, in a while. I don't think schools are going to go for that. And county clerks are not crazy about that. So the plan at the moment is that if this were to pass, if a school board said, we'd like to do this, that the county clerk would mail them ballots. It'd be a very simple ballot. It would have 2 names on it. And the primary, it might have more than 2 names. In my opinion, this would be helpful because it would show them how to fill out a ballot, how to sign it, how to do that technicality of getting it in the ballot correctly in the return mail box. Dottie I've had a few conversations with Ricky Hatch and the Weber clerk and with Sherry Swenson, the Salt Lake County clerk. There's a small fiscal note. It would require the clerks to create some different ballots. There would be some time involved. There's a small amount of money that would be involved. Dottie's meeting with Justin Lee on Friday, who is the state director of elections.
Thank you.
Member Straight?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. We're all, of course, aware of the 26th Amendment to the Constitution, which dropped the age from 21 to 18 in national elections. And so this does have a precedent in some respects. If you're old enough to die in Vietnam, you're old enough to vote. And so my question, though, is in regards to 16 and 17-year-olds' right to vote, does this address whether they would also have the right to serve? Because usually in many elections like city council or other local boards, the age that you get the right to vote is also the age which you can hold office. Is there anything along those lines in this bill?
I'm going to ask Dottie to answer after me. There is not. My oldest daughter attended one of her high school years going to school in Germany, attending schools in German with German students. She wanted to learn German because my wife's parents immigrated from Germany as young children in the 1920s. In Germany, almost nothing is legal until you're 18. And then when you're 18, everything is legal. Driving, you can't drive till you're 18. At 18, you can own a gun. In the United States, it depends upon states and the federal government. Some things are 21 and some are 18 and some are 17 and some are 20. So it's because we have a federal system of government, we give power to states and in localities, which I like. It also makes for a little bit more confusion. At the moment, I just see this as voting at the moment. And I have no ulterior motive of having kids vote for president at 16. This is vote for local school board, and that's all that's in the bill. But Dottie, would you like to comment?
Dottie?
Yeah, sure. I definitely agree with Representative Risco. I can't defend anything far than a local school board race for allowing students to have a voice, primarily because local school boards are the most direct impact any form of government institution has directly to a student is a local school board. What I think is that at age 16, we're permitted to have a driver's license and we're able to drive, but we're not able to drink. I think that government sets those age limits based on how beneficiary they can be to students. Me having the ability to drive means that I can go to work, I can.
Member Straight, did you have a follow-up?
Could I just add one coda, President Huntsman? In my reading, I did discover in Philadelphia, they do something very interesting. I think they allow middle school and high school students to vote to elect a student member to the Philadelphia School Board. only high school and middle school students vote, but that student they elect is a voting member of the Philadelphia School Board. That's an interesting side note.
Yes,
Member
thank
Booth?
you for those great comments. And
Oh, Member Straight, sorry. Did you have a follow-up, Member Straight? Member Booth?
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Dottie speak to us today and to see the way that she has stepped forward with a great idea of involving some great young minds in important decisions that are made at the local level. In 16 years on the Nebo School Board, my greatest joy every single time that we had our student council visit with and spend a couple of hours with our board, we discovered some of the most important ideas that we ever encountered as school board members. And their ideas were so spot on and so relevant to the challenges that we were facing as a board in a fast growing district. We welcomed and we're thrilled to have that kind of input. And I am very supportive of this wonderful idea to give these young people an opportunity to practice something as important as making their voice heard in what is very important to them in their lives, as a prelude to making their voice heard throughout the rest of their lives as voting citizens and making a difference in their individual communities. Thank you so much, Dottie, for the wonderful idea and for having the courage to follow it through. It takes some effort, as I'm sure you've discovered. So thank you very much on behalf of all of us who have such a love for the students of our great state of Utah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Lear?
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you, Dottie. And I'm so proud that this comes from a student in Salt Lake District at West High School. And I very much support this effort. I think it is just exciting. All of us who've been teachers in our lives know that the best way to gain a skill is to practice. And it is truly, as Dottie pointed out, embarrassing that the first decade of their lives in Utah frequently, despite our great message about community commitment and involvement, only 14% of young people voted. So I hope this kind of practice would increase that percentage. I cannot support this enough. I'm glad, Representative Risco, that you didn't hide the fiscal note. I know there'll be a cost, but this is so much more important and valuable than any citizenship test, than any civic project. The fact that students actually get to vote for meaningful officers in their own community. So I completely support this. And if we need to put our money where our mouth is in terms of wanting students to be civically engaged. Thanks. And thank you, Dottie. I'm so impressed.
The fiscal note is $17,000. It's not great. It's not high. And, I'm so proud of Dottie. Thank you, Carol.
Member Cannon?
Thank you very much. I too feel supportive and happy to see this coming out. I think it's exemplary to have a student be the advocate and the instigator of such legislation. I have a couple of questions. The bill talks about having individual students register to vote. I'm just wondering, is there a thought that registration could carry on so that they would automatically be registered voters as they get a little older? Because I have the same concerns about the low voter turnout, and especially among youth. And I think this is a great way to address it. just wondering if, once they're registered, they can stay registered for future elections.
Representative Risco?
Dottie, would you answer?
Yeah, of course. The answer is yes. I think that's really where the impact of the bill really plays in. I think there are very few bills which takes hit at multiple levels of the situational problem that we're facing, which is Utah youth are not engaged. But allowing students to pre-register to vote, for those 2 years between 16 and 18, students are just sitting and waiting for their right to vote. But the ages 18 through 22 are a terrible time to create a new habit because we're moving out, we're getting jobs, we're going to college. So this will automatically pre-register a student to vote. They will have the right to vote for that single school board race, and then that will carry over. And they're always welcome to unregister to vote as well. It's their choice.
Janet, it's a very good question. Currently, 16 and 17-year-olds can initiate, I would like to be registered to vote when I'm 18. 2 years ago, I got legislation passed which allows 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections if they're going to be 18 by the general election and they're pre-registered. This legislation would add another path for 16 and 17-year-olds to register, and that would be to get online and say, well, I want to vote in the school board election this fall, or the primary election school board in June. And once they do that and take that action, the clerks have told me that they'll just keep them in the list, and when they hit 18, they are adult registered voters.
I think that's just tremendous. I'm so thrilled to hear it. May I ask a follow-up?
Do that.
I'm wondering if the Utah School Boards Association has heard about this or has taken any position.
The Joint Legislative Council took a position in opposition last Friday.
Oh.
I'm told it was mostly rural school districts. Alpine and Salt Lake are somewhat supportive. Salt Lake is very supportive. Salt Lake is incredibly supportive. Dottie, I want you to know that Dottie's on her own got an audience with Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson. Dottie has reached out to county clerks on the Wasatch Front. Dottie is organizing her peer students. It's not surprising to me that some local school board members might be a little reticent. Not me. When I spoke to 4 weeks ago to the Joint Legislative Committee, the Friday noon committee, one school board member said, well, what if someone promises to put Coke in the drinking fountains? And my response was, I remember sitting in the gym in South Davis Junior High School in 1968 or 69, when someone running for 8th or 9th grade president said, I'll put Coke in the drinking fountains. And we all laughed. And we were 8th and 9th graders, and we knew he wasn't serious, and we knew he was making a joke. We get it. My experience as a school teacher of junior high and high school students and dealing with young people, young adults, is that they will rise to your expectations. Speaking to a couple of board members from Alpine who were talking about how they could combine this with education, I had two ideas for them. You have a lot of students who are bused. Don't do it after school. Have a noon meeting. And then I said, well, have all the high school principals, if they're willing, have an assembly schedule. Bring in all your 16 and 17-year-olds to the gym or to the auditorium. Have kids write down questions on 3x5 cards and let your student body officers moderate. And let those students have an hour with the people running for school board. I'll bet I had an audience in May. I went to Yandri Chatwin and said, I'd like to see what teachers are doing teaching kids online. She connected me with a 3rd grade teacher, Liberty Elementary in my district. I wanted to just hang out and lurk, but the teacher had a better idea. She said, Representative Risco is joining us on Wednesday. What would you like? He's in the legislature where they make laws. What would you like to talk to him about? She sent me 6 or 7 questions the kids came up with. A student asked me if we could have more police on the school grounds and in the neighborhoods because he didn't always feel safe. They asked me about the pandemic. They asked me about when they would be going back to school. These were 3rd graders. They ask great questions. I'm not concerned about 16 and 17-year-olds.
Can I ask one question of Dottie? One of the things you mentioned was a desire to have input on school start times. And I've been an advocate of that. Can you tell me a little bit what your thoughts are about school start times?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think we're definitely doing something like that in Salt Lake City. I do think that students have a lot of pressure and strain on them to be waking up, at 6 in the morning to go to school at 7:45, to get out of school at 2:30, and then to do 4 or 5 hours of homework after that. You can always extend the start time to be later, like 8:30 or 9. But to do that, you also need to have actions that back up the workload that students are having. If you prolong the start time of school, but you don't reduce the homework amount, then students are going to be staying up later into the evenings than they would have normally. And that in turn won't really be as progressive as we hoped in improving student mental health. So as long as both of those actions are implemented together and unanimously, I think that it has great promise for improving student mental health and well-being.
Well said, Dottie. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple other board members with their hands raised, and then we've got to get back into our legislative agenda here. Board Member Earl.
Hi, I was finally able to get on, so thank you. I'm glad I'm here today. I guess my question, and I think Representative Risco, you kind of answered this a little bit, is that the key component isn't the vote itself, it's the fact that they have an understanding behind their vote, right? Because just casting a vote for something is not really, that's not really being civically engaged. You're doing something, but it's the knowledge behind it. So I think you answered what I was going to ask is, are you hearing from districts that they are encouraging and understanding of what the current issues are in areas? And you kind of answered that. I don't know if you have further to add or if there's other dialogue about that, but I think that's just a key issue here is it's more than just a vote. It's also the understanding behind it.
I think you make an excellent point, Jenny. I think this is up to individual school boards to structure to either not do it if they're not comfortable. No one's forcing them. If they want to move ahead, I think they can structure it in certain ways that make them feel comfortable that there's some understanding. I think that's totally appropriate. I think that would be welcome. And when I was asked 2 years ago if 17-year-olds were okay, I was told by a legislator that some research shows that young people don't come to their full cognitive capacities in their early 20s. And I said, yeah, I read that research. I taught high school and junior high. I get it. I know people my age who haven't come into their full cognitive capacities. So do we really want to use that as a requisite for voting? But that's a good question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative Risco and Dottie, for being here and introducing House Bill 338. It's quite an adventure to move a bill forward and get a sponsor and all the lobbying. So thank you for your efforts and thank you for your service.
Dottie is Utah's Amanda Gorman, and you just need to mark on your calendar when she's 25, so when she's eligible to run. Thanks.
Well, there you go. Hey, thank you, and good luck with your pursuit.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Be safe.
You too.
Deputy Superintendent Angie Collins, I'm going to look at we've got 40 minutes here to cover a lot of ground. So board members, hopefully we can get to every one of your bills. We're kind of getting to that point where hopefully you're not going through discovery on them, but it is a good time to ask clarifying questions and not take a position on it unless there's a motion on the table. So I think we can get through quite a few bills if we keep that in mind moving through them. So Angie, please continue.
Yes. Great. Thank you, Chair Huntsman. I 100% agree with you. We have quite a few bills on this list. There's no way we're going to get through them all. We did put those towards the front of the list that we think you will be most interested in. Just a reminder, if you ever want to ask questions about any of these bills, you're always welcome to contact me or Jeff or staff after the meeting. So we're going to go to HB 378 now, Education Standards Review Committee Amendments by Representative Last. This bill is a bill that you may remember we requested from the legislature, or requested Representative Last to sponsor. What the bill would do is it requires the state board to notify the speaker and the president whenever a standards review committee is about to be formed. So I apologize, and then gives them 30 days to appoint their 5 parent members each. And after 30 days, if they do not make the appointments for the parent review or the standards review committee, it delegates that authority to the chair of the board to appoint parent members instead. And so I believe that this will allow for our standards review processes to speed up, and we'll continue to solicit nominations the way we do for our other advisory councils. Be happy to answer questions. If not, I can move to the next bill.
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Great. I'll go ahead and move forward then with first substitute SB 184. Just a reminder that this bill, the underlying bill that Senator Reeby is running, was requested by the board, and it was based on recommendations from the board's APAC committee, the Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee. What it would do, the underlying bill would waive a number of reporting requirements, including the requirement to issue school letter grades and post assessment results due to this spring's assessment on our website. We would continue to collect the data. The data would be available to USBE as well as LEAs, and LEAs would be free to publish the information on their own. It's just that we wouldn't publish it on USBE's website. Senator Johnson has a substitute, so it's the first substitute, SB 184, that does 2 significant things that we wanted to make you aware of. It's hard to see in this version of the bill, but there is a section of code that is missing. It's 53E-4-311, which waived the requirement for the board just for this year, again, for the board to identify schools not achieving acceptable levels of student performance as required in that section. That is something that was key to the APAC recommendations and our recommendations that's in Senator Reeby's bill. There's also, you can see Jeff is showing on the screen there, something that we did not request and is not in the original bill. The substitute strikes or deletes the language that provides the board the authority to make a determination not to issue letter grades, essentially, in years when we have a new baseline or we have a transition from an assessment system or the accountability system. And so we are still working to find out the why behind this substitute, but both the SB 184 and this first substitute will be discussed this afternoon at 4 o'clock in the Senate Education Standing Committee meeting. Be happy to answer questions now if you have any about that first substitute.
Member Straight?
Yes, so my question is, would the dashboard be eliminated or just the letter grades?
Great, yes. So no, the dashboard will not be eliminated. And Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Achievement, could probably answer the specifics, but we'd still have the dashboard and there would still be elements that would be reported. It's just the elements related to student achievement, related to the assessments, this spring would not be reported. I don't know if Assistant Superintendent Nielsen is available and could add if I spoke.
Assistant Superintendent Nielsen, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Chair. Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning. And yes, the bill itself requests a removal of the requirement to publish state achievement data on the dashboard, but it doesn't prohibit us from doing such. And so an example would be in 2020, at the suspension of state assessments, the state board was granted relief from or a waiver for reporting on the school dashboard, both from the state and federal level. However, there were several elements of the school report card that we were able to collect. The students' English proficiency for our students learning English was one of those as an example, as well as our student graduation rate and several other things. So we've moved forward and published that information on the school dashboard. The reason that APAC believes it's wise to request a waiver from the requirement to publish that information is we still have a lot of unknowns about our 2021 assessment data and the collection process. And one of the things that we have to be very cautious of is publishing data in a way that leads and contributes to misinterpretation or misuse of that data. But we're moving forward as staff for the state board, again, collecting assessment data and then conducting analysis through the summer and into the fall. And we will come back to the board with recommendations about how we believe that information should be shared with the public to support the board's longstanding tradition or position of being transparent with data that we collect from our students.
Okay, did you have a follow-up, Member Straight?
No, just thank you for clarifying what I thought it meant. I wanted to make certain for my purpose and everyone else's. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm not seeing either hands up. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, before you move on, this first substitute, there hasn't been a response of why, a good reason why this is trying to move forward. We haven't heard a response, or you haven't received one?
No.
Okay. I guess
we haven't, but we do hope to go up this afternoon to the committee meeting and speak with Senator Johnson before the meeting starts.
Okay.
See what we can find out.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Please continue.
All right, I'm going to turn the time over to Jeff now to speak about second substitute HB 42 and HB 279.
Great. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. We're going to jump over to House Bill 42 very quickly, and I'm going to point out right now that the current original version of the bill is still the version that has been moving through the process. I'm going to quickly show what the original version says in it, and then there is a second substitute that I wanted to highlight for you that has yet to be adopted, but it could be. And so it's something you should all be aware of. And if you do end up taking motions on this bill, you'll need to specify if you're taking a motion on the original or on the second substitute, just as a heads up. So very quickly, this is one of the three bills that Representative Pulsifer is running in relation to the legislative audit on reports that came out last year. And I'll just scroll down and highlight for you this yellow section here on lines 147 to 159. This is the original bill, and it really just specifies that the state board needs to create a process in working with LEAs to review any impacts that a new rule update might have or legislation might have in terms of creating additional reporting requirements. So that's essentially, get a work group or something together and make sure you're constantly reviewing the reports that are out there and provide feedback when needed. The second substitute I'll pull up, and it's a little harder to read because they don't have all the highlights that I have, but I just want to show you the differences between the original and the second substitute that is floating around. If I scroll down a little bit, the second substitute still has the original part about creating a process, but you'll start to notice that here on lines 307, we start to talk about something a little different. This would now require that as we create that process, we then in turn work with the Office of the State Auditor to create the procedures that would look at creating a comprehensive list of reporting requirements, coordinating data collection, and so forth. Actually, as you continue to read this, it's pretty much every single finding that was in the legislative audit is placed here into the bill as a requirement for the state board to do in consultation with and with the oversight of the Office of the State Auditor, as well as in some portions, the Office of the State Treasurer. So we're bringing in these other offices to kind of provide a consulting managerial type role in working with the board on implementing all of the different portions of the audit that came out with those 9 findings that we have discussed before, and then that Darren presented to you in the last board meeting. So that is a very different version of this bill. It would require a lot more. There's also an entire adoption of a platform or a tool that you can see here on line 336 that we would have to procure and get working and operating, and we'd have to work with the state auditor and treasurer's office to select that tool to do surveys, organize all the plan requirements, consolidate, create a consolidated needs assessment, and so forth. So you'll notice, you'll recognize a lot of the language in this bill from the legislative audit findings, but this is very different from the original version. It adds a whole new component to it. We wanted to highlight that for you. That essentially House Bill 42, and I'll stop for questions if there are any, or move on.
I'm not seeing any hands raised. So
Okay.
Continue.
So next we will go to House Bill 279. This is Representative Snow. And this is higher education for incarcerated youth. You might be wondering, why are we talking about higher education? And that is because this would allow for youth that are in the custody of the Division of Juvenile Justice Services to essentially enroll in concurrent enrollment that's being offered by Dixie State University. So there is a little crossover, as we do provide concurrent enrollment opportunities to students who are in high school. So as long as the students meet all the criteria of an eligible student in concurrent enrollment, they would be able to work with Dixie State University to get those students receiving concurrent enrollment credit as part of their educational services while they're in the custody of Juvenile Justice Services. And you'll notice our code just has one little minor change in the concurrent enrollment code that allows a student who is in the custody of JJS to be an eligible student to receive concurrent enrollment if it is offered. And that is House Bill 279. Are there any questions?
Yes, Member Earl.
Yeah, I do have a question. I know up in my area up here in the north that there are a number of students that take online courses that have anyways. My question is specifically about, is this offered at other institutions too, or is this only through Dixie? Do you know?
That's a great question. And if there's staff on here that hears me saying the wrong thing, please jump in and correct me. But the answer is no, not currently. And my understanding is that this would be offered in terms of students who are in the custody of JJS, statewide would have the ability to do the concurrent enrollment that is offered through Dixie. I hope I have not misstated that, but I believe that was the intent. I'm just looking to see if there's any staff that's disagreeing with me, and I don't see it quite yet. But
so the idea is anybody within that program could then use this resource specifically through Dixie to get those credits. Okay.
Correct.
I wondered if other institutions were involved in that, but it sounds like that's not the case. Okay.
Not seeing any other hands. Please continue.
Okay. I think I'll pass it back to Angie.
Yes.
Deputy Superintendent Collins.
Thank you. So the next bill that we'll be discussing is second substitute, SB 175. You may remember that the last time we were together last week, only the original bill was public, and we shared with you a number of requests for changes that we asked for after the first substitute became public on Tuesday. The good news is many of the requests that staff recommended were incorporated. However, there are still some issues with the bill, and Assistant Superintendent Voorhees sent me a list of concerns that she's received from the field, from our LEA colleagues, and I will share those with all of you right after this meeting, and so you can take a look at those and ask questions. But I'll just raise to you the kind of the biggest issue that still hasn't been addressed, and was one of the recommendations we made earlier this week that was not accepted, is the definition of incidental benefit. As we codify that in statute, it arguably takes away any authority from the board to be able to clarify that definition. As Leah has explained to me, that definition of incidental benefit that's cited to in the CFR is years old. There's been a lot of case law since then, a lot of guidance. And if you reviewed the feedback that we sent to Senator Andrade on Tuesday, you would have seen that number 4 had quite a long list of a description of incidental benefit. That that language is actually what's in the board rule now, in our board rule. And it's also been adopted by other states like Wyoming, Wisconsin, and Nebraska, and has been approved and supported by the Federal Department of Education. What I understand from discussing the issue with Senator Andrade and Royce Van Tassel, who's been working closely with the sponsor, is that when the board codified that language that's in number 4 in the feedback that I sent you earlier this week, the board and the committee also added some numbers or to provide clarity to LEAs. I understand that those numbers are what a couple of LEAs really have disagreement with. What I did want to give you the background on is that for those board members who weren't with us last year, Assistant Superintendent Voorhees and her team spent a year and maybe year and a half working behind the scenes on all of those changes to the special education manual and the provisions in board rule. And then the manual came to the board and committee, and the board, the Law and Licensing Committee, I believe, took either 3 or 4 committee meetings of very intense discussion. And oftentimes after committee meetings, Leah and her team would get feedback on the request from board members to update the code or to update the board rule provisions. So the board spent a lot of time, the board staff, and we received a lot of feedback from LEA stakeholders. In addition, the changes were also run by the Federal Department of Education. And so if this definition is codified, this incidental benefit definition, it will absolutely supersede all of the work that you did. And is it not in there in the second sub? Can you scroll up? I don't know that I see the definition is still there. If it's been taken out, that may resolve. Oh, I know why, Jeff. It's down at the bottom. It's just in one section towards the bottom. With it being codified in code this way, like I said, it takes away the ability for the board to provide clarification that kind of codifies all of the case law that's happened over the last 17 years. There are some other issues that, again, that stakeholders have shared with us, but if that incidental benefit definition stays, it will essentially trump all of the work, at least in this area, that the board did around clarifying our special ed rules manual. And Leah Voorhees is also, I believe, in attendance, and either of us would be happy to answer questions.
Okay, Board Member Earl.
Sorry, I didn't take it down from the last one.
Oh, I thought you were diving into the Board
Yeah.
Member Lear.
A question for Dr. Voorhees, if I may, Chair.
Please.
I would like to know if, as written, the second sub is something that she would personally support. I think Angie has described the incidental benefit definition problem. But in addition to that, are there other concerns where that Leah would still say this is not a helpful bill for the special ed students or for reporting requirements?
Dr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. So my biggest concern with the second substitute, and the biggest concern with the second substitute that I have heard in the last 24 hours from stakeholders, and I have heard from many, is that definition of incidental benefit. There are, as Angie said, little things that it can still be improved, but are not, to be honest, not substantive. In the second sub, really the substantive issue is that definition of incidental benefit.
Thank you, very helpful.
Vice Chair Belknap.
Yes, could somebody help me? I tried to listen to committee, but I had another engagement, so I only heard part of it. What is Senator Anderegg trying to solve here? And does it create more issues or changes than for the whole? Is this for a specific group? Can someone help me here? What was stated in committee?
Dr. Voorhees or Deputy Superintendent Collins, either one of you, feel free.
I guess I would restate or try to summarize what I understood from the committee is that, number one, it seems that elements of what was codified in our board rules or our manual might have, as was stated, are narrower or more restrictive than what the federal definition is. I heard that comment. I do believe there's a couple of LEAs, and I can't say for sure how many, that have asked for the flexibility, but it doesn't sound like the majority of the LEAs are seeking that. So they feel like, it seems like it's an intent to allow special education funds to be used to support students who do not have IEPs or non-special students with disabilities is a part of it, or to be used for general education services.
Follow up, Chair?
Yes.
So Angie, your statement to us was that they're suggesting that it's maybe more restrictive. So I don't know if this Chair, I don't know who this goes to, but is it more restrictive?
Dr. Voorhees, do you want to answer this? Is this more restrictive or less?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yes, the board rule, or your board rule on page 232 of the special education manual, it's my understanding from the committee that it's X.U.3 that is the concern. And this is the statement: except in a co-taught class, because co-teaching is allowable, for a group of 10 or more total students, the service being provided or the task being performed by the special education professional must be outlined on the IEP for at least half of the students participating in the group. So your rule put an actual number, not a percentage, because if you remember, the conversation for several months in a row was, should the guardrail be a number of students or should it be a percentage of students on what incidental benefit might mean? And the place that you landed is, except in a co-taught class, when there are 10 or more students, 50% of them would need to have the services and supports that the special ed teacher is providing on their IEP. If it's smaller than 10, like a preschool class or a social skills group, then that wouldn't apply. That's just in a class of 10 or more. So incidental benefit as described in the CFR, as Angie said 17 years ago, it simply says one or more students who are not eligible or without disabilities may benefit.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Board Member Lear, your hand's raised.
Yes, I had another question, and this may be for Angie more than for Leah. I was looking at the changes around lines 170. I was trying to just find the line number. 162. It's about the rulemaking, Angie, and it seems that there were changes around that. It was easier to see on the on the comparison version, where it looked like instead of the board making rules and being able to put them into a manual, which was decided some years ago and acceptable to the administrative rules staff, that now it looks like the manual would have to be a rule in and of itself. Have you heard anything about that?
Chair, is it okay if I respond?
Deputy Superintendent Collins.
Thank you. I do not think it addresses that. I haven't heard there a concern about us incorporating by reference the rule manual, although I will say there have been some questions about why we incorporate by reference. A lot of the federal requirements are, as you may know, the rules manual is very comprehensive. It includes not only state program issues and state rules, but it includes the federal laws and regulations in a way to hopefully make it easier for those who are responsible for overseeing special education programs to have all the resources in one place. So at one point, I have heard a concern about why do we do it that way, but I don't think that this bill is trying to address that, and I don't believe that the language there does. I will say, though, that it seems that the language might be doing something in the way of trying to limit what you should be addressing in the board rule. And you can see that it's really specific to addressing the accounting for the use of funds and for documentation required. We still have that general broad rulemaking authority in your powers section of the code, which I think we could still do more than what's here. But I do know that the sponsor has at times, in a totally separate context, not necessarily been in love with the board's broad rulemaking authority. So I don't know if that language is an implied attempt to say, board, just do this in board rules with respect to special education. But I do not believe it addresses the issue of incorporation by reference. I believe we can still do that. And if at some point there was a problem with it, we could keep the manual, but then just take all of the state provisions and put it in one long rule if we needed to.
Thank you.
Board Member Booth.
I just have just a straightforward question for our experts listening in and participating. As we look at all the complexities and consider all of the angles and everything that's kind of swirling around in regards to this bill, what is best for our children in the state of Utah?
Dr. Voorhees or Deputy Superintendent Stallings? That's a tough question.
Yeah.
I'm happy to respond, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Voorhees.
Board Member Booth, in as brief a form as possible, what is best for students with disabilities is to have an IEP team review their performance data, determine their needs, write goals to address the needs, determine what services will help that student access and make progress in the general education curriculum and achieve those goals, determine what placement those services need to be provided in, and then provide those services in that placement. I think a bottom line of the concerns that we heard from the stakeholders at the committee meeting yesterday is actually not about the funding. The LEAs did talk about the funding, but the non-LEA stakeholders, their bottom line concern was that this bill might lead some LEAs to believe that they no longer needed to provide specially designed, disability-specific services as outlined on the IEP, that they might be able to provide a program to all students and call it special education, as opposed to the individualized service that each student needs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that clarity of what our position should be.
Member Straight.
Thank you.
Thank you. I so appreciate that question by Board Member Booth. I want to go back to the question asked by Vice Chair Belknap, having to do with is our rule, current rule, more restrictive? I want to go to the opposite side of that. Is the definition of incidental benefit as defined in Senate Bill 175 less restrictive? That's my question.
Deputy Superintendent Stallings, do you want to answer that question? Is it more restrictive?
The definition of incidental benefit, I apologize, is that what the question?
That's what.
The definition in code, or the definition in this bill, is probably broader. It's not as specific, and it doesn't provide as much clarity. What I would say, and again, Leah can correct me if I'm wrong, that the definition and the provisions included in our recent updates to the board rule were all in response to looking at the latest information in case law, the latest guidance from our federal Department of Education, as well as a response to provide more clarity to LEAs so that when our staff monitor them in special education, that the LEAs won't feel a gotcha, that they could be very clear about what standard we'll be monitoring to. And that's that. So I would say it's clear, and in some ways it might be more restrictive than that federal definition, but what you don't get in that federal definition is a summary of all of the case law and guidance that's occurred in the last, 17 years.
Oh, follow-up question?
Yes, follow-up.
So as a board member, we have our rules. They're based on well thought out, justifiable, legal, proper ways of doing things. If this bill were to pass as is, would I have an obligation not to implement that as it being in violation of our current best practices in law?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer that. That's great.
Stallings.
So I think we would need to rewrite our board rules because the provisions in our board rule that conflict with respect to our state special education, yes, we would need to revise or not implement.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, just double checking my understanding. So under this definition, would it be feasible to say that a classroom of 25, 30 students, a general education teacher could be paid with special education funds if one student in the general education classroom had an IEP?
Dr. Voorhees, do you want to answer that question?
Yes. So as I was stating before, when I was responding to Board Member Booth's question, we do have to separate out the two issues between the funding and the providing of services. I think an important thing to bring into the conversation is the federal guidance related to spending federal dollars. If the guidance for whether or not you can pay for a regular education or a general education teacher is as such. Regular education teachers may be paid to attend special education in-service activities and IEP meetings. Time must be documented in a personal activity report. Instructional costs, this is to your point, I think, Vice Chair Davis, instructional costs of regular education teachers are not allowed, even when students with disabilities are assigned to that teacher. Instructional costs of a teacher with both special education and regular education licensure are allowed when the teacher is assigned as a special educator, If the teacher is assigned as a general educator, the salary, parentheses, or a portion of the salary may not be charged to IDEA, even if the teacher has a sizable number of students with disabilities assigned to the class. So the funding question is that you can't simply pay for the general education teacher because there are special education students in the class. Okay, so the answer to that question for IDEA funds, now we're talking about state funds in the bill, but for IDEA funds is no. So the question, the really important question I think that you're asking, Board Member Davis, is does this bill give LEAs the ability to pay for that general education teacher with state funds? if it does, that is where the concern comes from, that we would now have two different standards. And that is what the LEA representatives, the case representatives, the Council of Administrators for Special Education representatives that spoke at the committee meeting yesterday were concerned about.
You have a follow-up, Vice Chair Davis?
No, thank you.
So I'd have one question, and that is it possible for special ed education to happen in our state with an IEP for that student to live in 1 day or 1 hour or one place in an environment following the federal standards, being in compliance with the federal side, and then some other time in the day or the next day live in the environment of the state standard? Can we serve our special ed students with those double standards, with two different standards and processes? This is my biggest challenge with this, and is it doable, then this might pass, but I just can't see how it's possible. But so I'm asking, is it doable? Dr. Voorhees, you live closer in the trench of all of this than Deputy Superintendent Stallings. That's my hang up on this. Is it doable?
I'm happy to respond, Chair. And from the special education directors that I've talked to and the case representative that I talked to last night after the committee hearing, their response is, it is possible. It would be so much work that they would no longer want to work in this field. They don't have the capacity. Anything is possible. They currently do not have the capacity, the human capacity, the funding capacity, the knowledge and skill capacity. So that's, he would say no.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my question. Thank you. Board Member Hart.
Yeah, I just keep going back to, I try to play it through. I don't understand why a member of our legislature would at one point allocate special ed funds, but then turn around, it's okay to spend those special education funds on non-special education students. So I'm opposed at a very basic level. If these are special education funds, then there are plenty of ways and plenty of mechanisms to have co-teaching. The least restrictive environment is already a standard by which we're all held. I'm just wondering why enlarge and complicate or muddy the waters? Why are we making it more complicated, not less complicated, for our practitioners, our LEAs, our charter schools who don't have a lot of staff to deal with these issues? Special ed funds should stay with special education students. And this bill would change that, correct? Angie, Leah?
Angie, do you want the Deputy Superintendent Stallings, this bill correct that environment or change that environment?
It does appear that that's the intent.
All right.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis, your hand raised? Or is that up before? I didn't.
Sorry, I thought.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not seeing any of their hands raised. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, we're running close on our time. Deputy Superintendent Jones definitely needs to step up to the plate here, and we've invited him to step up to the plate. Do you have any other bill that you just want to brief us on that's a hot topic of concern?
I could just briefly.
Board Member Lear, your hand's raised. Maybe she has one. Board Member Lear? Sorry. Angie.
Angie, unless you had something, and Chair, I was going to say that to Deputy Superintendent Stallings, if she has something that's burning, otherwise I would like her to just briefly mention or briefly discuss, it's not a very complicated bill, HB 382, online course access amendments, since that's been a difficult issue for the board recently.
Yes, I'll just go ahead, Jeff, and take it. I know you were prepared to, but what the bill does, and this is HB 382 online course access amendments, is it would, and it would require a separate pot of money or an appropriation that would allow the funds for that normally go from an LEA. So let's say a student is a student at West High, and then the West High student, participates in the statewide online education program. The funding for that student's participation in the program is deducted from West High's appropriation or Salt Lake City School District's appropriation. What this bill would do is for high schools that have 1,000 students or less than 1,000 students,
sure,
that amount would no longer be deducted from the LEA, but instead there would be a separate pot of money that would pay for that student's participation in the statewide online education program. So it appears to be a way for our smaller LEAs, our smaller high schools, to not have revenue taken from them when their students participate in the statewide online education program.
Thank you. And can I just say, Chair, that I very much support that compromise, that half a loaf approach, because the LEAs that I heard from on the SOEP contentious discussion were small LEAs for whom it was a significant cost, much more than what was portrayed by some staff members. It was a significant cost to cover the fees and the fee waivers and the supervision of students in SOEP classes. So I very much support this bill, this approach.
Deputy Superintendent Stallings, was there something outside of that? I know we're pushing on time, but
I'll just, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll just briefly mention that HB 274, it's called Government Records Transparency Act Amendments. It is a bill that we've already reached out to Representative Siegmiller. It creates a transparency website of sorts within the Office of the State Auditor regarding identifying data or individual identifiable data. As you may know, this under our student data privacy section and laws that apply to our school districts and charter schools, we already have a metadata dictionary that does this, where our LEAs upload and identify what elements they are collecting that has identifiable information. So we've asked Representative Siegmiller if he'd be willing to exempt our K-12 schools from that requirement, because they'd essentially be doing it twice. They'd have to do it for our office and through our metadata dictionary under our student data privacy laws, and they'd also have to do it again for the state auditor. So we think there's a duplication there. We don't know if Representative Siegmiller is aware that we have that already, that requirement. And that's it.
okay. Board Member Earl.
Yes, my question is, so you're talking about, is he referring to organizations that are accessing the personal identifiable information, or is he talking about just the data points? I just wanted to see a clarification there. Or do we collect just the dictionary of the points that we're collecting, or is it actually we're notifying, or we have a place to say that these organizations are accessing personal information currently? I just wanted a clarification on that. Do you know?
Yeah, installing that we have access to that House bill, don't we? Is that in our? Okay.
Yes, and Board Member Earl, you know who I would recommend that you reach out to, either Whitney Phillips or David Soleil. They'll be able to give you the details much better than I could.
Okay, I can do that. I just wanted a clarification, because there's a difference between gathering data and actually entities accessing data. So I'll reach out to them and find out that clarification. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Stallings. We're going to move next to call on Deputy Superintendent Jones. You're going to give us an update on our funding priorities.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, Chair Huntsman, board members. So item number 4.1, legislative session funding priorities. The backups reflect that, as of the 9th, what the situation is, and it's still the same. Our priorities and the list of requests went to PEA. PEA has made since then their recommendations to EAC, and they still stand in the EAC channels. I was hoping that we would have revenue by this point. I did check with the legislative fiscal analysts. My understanding of where that's at in the process. They've indicated that we could have revenue by tomorrow or Monday. And then, the EAC process is next week as well. So I don't have anything beyond that, but, I do want to make sure that, just to be clear, that anything of these requests, even the requests that PEA has made, are subject to change based on what the revenue count comes in at, and also the process that is the Executive Appropriations Committee process. So I think it's a fantastic process in the sense that our request did go from PEA into EAC, but I just want to be clear that we're all subject to the revenue aspect of the process, and then ultimately what EAC decides as far as the appropriations go. With that, Chair Huntsman, I'll turn it back to you. So subject to any questions or concerns, this concludes my report on item number 4.1.
Okay, questions from board members? I'm not seeing any hands raised. When that comes out, will you be able to shoot us an email?
Absolutely. Yeah, Dell and I will monitor it, and then, one of or both of us will send out an email on what the revenue is. And of course, when the EAC makes their makes their decisions or takes action, we'll ensure that timing wise, you're alerted as soon as that takes place. So,
okay. Thank you.
Okay. And sir, Chair Huntsman, if I may, I'm always available for board members to call offline and ask specific questions about funding levels or any of the programs or anything like that. I just want to emphasize that. And I've had board members take me up on that, and I so appreciate their support and their patience, with getting back to them. But I'm always open to take calls or email inquiries on the process or the situation at the time. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, board members. Next on our agenda is motions. Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a motion that we support HB 279, that's Snow's bill about an incarcerated youth, and that's my motion.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh,
I think, well, we can grab Cannon, board member Cannon, or Straight. It was like a tie. So,
doesn't matter. Let Cannon have it.
Want to speak to your motion, Vice Chair Belknap?
Yeah, just really quickly. I think these are some of our most vulnerable students, and just the opportunity to be able to get degrees, I think, is important. And so that's why I think we should support this bill.
Okay, so the motion before the board is to take a position of support on House Bill 379. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, I'll repeat the motion kind of how it was read. I'll put more context into it. The motion before the board is to support House Bill 279, higher education for incarcerated youth. So board members at this time, please vote. I'm not sure. I think we have, it looks like the motion passed.
I saw everyone, Chair, with board member Moss.
I don't believe board member Moss is with us. He said he had to be excused later in our meeting, and so the motion passes unanimously. Board member Cannon. Was your hand raised?
Yes, my hand was raised. I would like to make a motion that the board oppose SB 175, first sub. This is the one that we've had long discussions over that creates two different levels of special ed requirements that would be near to impossible for our LEAs to deal with and to know how to appropriately do state level requirements and federal requirements. I think this is just not a good bill.
Let's get a second on it before we.
I'll second it. This is Board Member Booth.
Okay. And are you talking, are we speaking to this? I just want to make sure we're meeting expectation. Isn't the second substitute what we were talking about?
The second substitute was not adopted. It's my understanding now that the first substitute is the bill that's on the floor.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Please correct me, staff, if that's not correct, I'm wrong.
Superintendent Stallings, is that correct?
Chair, Board Member Cannon is correct. That is the one that was approved by the committee and passed out of committee. If you wanted to oppose both, you could make a motion to oppose both the first and second. That's up to you. But the first is right now. I do believe that Senator Anderegg might interpret that as that we support the second substitute, since a lot of there were some corrections or things that were improved from the first to second. So I just want to caution that it could be sent as a message that we support the second, but not the first.
So,
Chair, may I amend my motion then?
Well, without objection, I do you want to take a position, you want it to state oppose House Bill 175 first and second substitute?
Yes, but it's Senate bill.
Oh, Senate bill, sorry.
Isn't it?
Thank you. I stand corrected. Is the second still good?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Without objection and changing things. So the motion that's before the board is to take the position of opposing Senate bill to oppose first and second substitute Senate Bill 175 special education least restrictive requirement amendment. Did you want to speak more to your motion, Board Member Cannon?
Thank you, Chair. I think I spoke sufficiently.
Okay, discussion to that motion. I've got hands raised, but back when we were making the motion, I had Board Member Lear that I believe wanted to make a motion, and Board Member Hart. I'm just trying to follow things in order. So if you take your hands down, unless you're going to speak to the motion. Board Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. I believe we talked about this enough that I don't want to elaborate, just other than to say that I absolutely support this motion. And yes, I think that's what's best for our students. And you.
Thank you. Member Earl.
Yes, I feel like this is a little bit of a moving target still, which makes me a little anxious when we have these subs, and I feel like there's probably going to be more subs coming out or more changes. So at this point, I'm not going to take a stand on this. So,
Member Hymas.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation as what Member Earl had just expressed here. I understand that there's still some issues that are happening with this bill, but maybe I could ask here, or maybe I should have asked earlier, but is Senator Anderegg, is he opposed to continually working on this bill? Is there somebody who can answer that, Angie, or Assistant Superintendent Angie?
Yeah, Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Deputy Superintendent.
Yes.
They're still working. I could answer it too, but I prefer you to answer that.
Sure. No, I do think Senator Anderegg is open to amendments, as well as Royce Van Tassel. I will say they have listened, and as you can see from each bill and sub, I think that many of the elements have been fixed or addressed. the biggest issue is that definition of incidental benefit, which one other approach is that the board could, instead of opposing the bill, make a request for the bill to codify the definition of incidental benefit, either to ask the board to do that or to codify what the board did in board rule into code. That would be another option, would be to be really specific about that issue of incidental benefit.
Follow up
if I could,
yeah.
Chair. Just I guess my overall question is this bill salvageable, or is this as good as it gets? I like the idea of waiting on this. I hate to oppose a bill that's not finished, especially when there are people willing to work with the board on making appropriate changes.
So and I don't know, Deputy Superintendent Collins, you want to comment? Mike Hamus.
Sure.
Concern?
Yes, I absolutely. Board Member Hymas, I think in some ways that's a rhetorical question, and it's kind of a question of strategy of, do we want to have a motion or a position of opposed or some explicit direction about what it is that the board is concerned with? It seems that the definition of incidental benefit is the concern here. I do not think at this point we've provided the feedback from day one, meaning the feedback about the problem of the definition of incidental benefit has been shared for 3 or 4 weeks on this bill, and it has not changed. Without the board's opposition, we are one of the only entities that it hasn't taken a position of opposed. We've got many organizations that represent students and individuals with disabilities who've opposed this, and we do get questions from the field about the board opposing it. But again, I totally respect your question and a strategy, and that's why I offered that other option of stating that the board is not going to support the bill unless, that definition of incidental benefit is fixed, or allows the board, some authority to provide additional, clarity on that definition as well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to make that request, if I'm honest with you, but I would like to give it more time. But thank you.
Board Member Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll speak in favor of opposing this one, just for the fact that all it seems to do is muddy the waters, and I don't know that legislation is really needed in this area. I don't know that we've identified any compelling need for anything, and there's been some resistance to reining in that incidental benefit clause. Essentially, by defining it the way they have, they're doing away with years and years of case law, which has tightened the definition of incidental benefit. And that creates a real problem for us in trying to administer this. Creating two systems just doesn't seem like an efficient way to manage this. And as was stated, these are funds that are set aside specifically for disabled students. Why should we be diverting those to other kids who are already funded in other ways? I don't see, I think it's a bill looking for a problem. There's nothing there that needs to be fixed this way.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you. I'll speak for the motion. I tried to really learn more as I was listening in Senate Ed Committee about this, and I found it pretty compelling that Granite District Special Ed Director, who represented all of the special ed directors from our districts in the state, spoke against this bill, and also a fellow from Utah State University representing 3 different disability advocacy groups, including the Utah Disability Law Center, said that they all opposed And I think it's one thing to continue working on the bill, but I think at the core of the bill, it really is just people have to decide, are they okay with using special education dedicated funds for general ed students or not? And yes, there is some incidental benefit sometimes for general ed students. Where is that reasonable line? Is it 30% of the class? Is it 100% of the class? Because if 100% of the students in the class are general ed and there's one student with special ed and all the aides in the class are paid out of special ed monies, it really creates, I'll use muddy waters that the last speaker just said, board member Scott Hansen, thank you. The other thing is, I'm not sure how dispute resolution would pan out, because dispute resolution is allowed for in federal law, but if I'm understanding correctly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the dispute resolution would follow the federal guidelines as opposed to any differentiated state guidelines when there comes to any IDEA implementation and things like that. So at this point, I would say, unless the basis of the bill is changed, I would oppose the bill.
Okay. Let's see. Board Member Lear, your hand was up. I didn't remove it, did I?
No, but Scott Hansen said what I was going to say, so thank you.
And I think the bill sponsor and that's interested in, and those that are supporting this bill are interested in this meeting and the feedback that comes from it. But one part that, as this motion's on the table, that hasn't been talked about is having two different standards out there, which adds a lot of complication to the poor educator that's in the trench. And in rural schools, it's really tough. But I can see where you have extra staff, dedicated staff in a very large district might be able to pull this off. But I just don't see that as a win when we're trying to deal with less paperwork, less compliance, and to have another standard out there paralleling the feds. It's like, I'll go back to that space. Is my student on federal dollars today, or are we on state dollars today? How are we going to package that? It's pretty intense. Board Member Earl, your hand's still raised.
Yeah, I just had another question, just in our dialogue here. From what I understand, the rule, sorry, am I not close enough? I apologize. The rule doesn't actually, does it force districts to use the money in this capacity? Is that what it's doing? Or do they still have the choice to use it how they want to, even if it alters the definition a little bit? Can someone answer that? Is this a forced?
Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Yes, so Board Member Earl, you're right. It does not force LEAs to use it that way. I think the intent of the bill is to provide more flexibility with the state funds. And then the question is, you still don't have that same flexibility on the federal side.
Okay, so it doesn't force them to create two systems. There's an element of maybe choice there, or flexibility, but it's not a required element. Am I understanding that right? So, okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, Board Member Lear.
Yes, thank you. Board Member Earl sparked a thought that I wanted to add. Vice Chair Belknap is fond of saying that we are board members for all the children of the state. And in some cases, that is particularly striking and poignant to me, and this is one of them. And I feel like protecting special education funds for special education children is one of my most important responsibilities for children throughout the state. So though I'm also a big fan of local control, I am probably a bigger fan of dedicating money that was supposed to be for students with disabilities specifically to students with disabilities. So that's my concern about leaving this to open-ended, and I would also support the motion to oppose. Thank you.
Board Member Earl, your hand's still raised. Is that on purpose? Oh, thank you. Well, let's vote on this. The motion before the board is that the board oppose first and second substitute Senate Bill 175 Special Education Least Restrictive Requirement Amendment. For board members, please vote at this time. Okay, the motion passes with 2 no votes. The no votes are Board Member Hymas and Board Member Earl. Is that how you've seen it, Vice Chairs?
Yes, and Board Member Moss is still not here.
And Board Member Moss not in on the vote. Okay. Board Member Lear.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to support House Bill 338, School District Voter Eligibility Amendments.
We have a motion to support House Bill 338. Is there a second?
I'll second that on the basis of discussion.
Board Member Straight. You want to speak to the motion, Board Member Lear?
I would. It's really unusual for me not to, or for me to support something that the USBE does not support. I really value their positions and their thinking. I think a really important message in this is, first of all, as I've said, it helps young people start in the practice of participating thoughtfully, as Board Member Earl points out, thoughtfully in the election process, something that will last their whole lives. Secondly, I think the bill sponsor and probably the young woman who instigated this were very thoughtful. It allows choice for LEAs. If an LEA feels comfortable involving young people in this discussion, has the resources to help inform them, it gives them that opportunity. If an LEA doesn't, then the LEA has a complete choice in that matter. But I think there's nothing more important than actually involving young people. I said this before, but it makes me so sad that 14% of our youngest voters voted in the most recent election. And that is something that I think we need to, as a school board, emphasis on school, need to work at changing and enlisting those young people in their civic responsibility and opportunity. So this is not going to be without some hiccups. I think there will be some, it'll provide some interesting discussion. And I think it is so important to give young people this opportunity. So I support it.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second, and thank you for speaking to the motion. Discussion, Board Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate what Board Member Lear had to say on this thing. I think if I was part of USBA, I think I would oppose it generally. But the part that really sells me on that we need to support this is that it doesn't require the LEAs to do it. It sounds like to me that if this were provided, there might be several LEAs that do choose to do this. And so that to me is what really kind of got the football over the goalpost in my regard. So that's why I support it. I do see I wouldn't support it if it wasn't voluntary.
Okay. Board Member Cannon.
Yes, I'm in support of this motion. I think that it has the safeguards around it of allowing an LEA to participate or not to participate. I agree that one of our biggest issues in Utah is low voter turnout, and particularly around our young people. I love that the bill incorporates getting them to register and then having that registration carry on so that they can continue to vote easily. And I think that it is more or less a pilot program. And if we have any LEAs who are brave enough to give their students an opportunity to give some input, that this might be an adventure worth taking. So I support this bill.
Board Member Hanson.
Thanks. I just wanted to voice the concerns that were stated by the rural schools board, which I sit on as our representative. They took a position against this bill, and the reasons that they were stated were there were concerns about voter manipulation of 16 and 17-year-olds. They stated that voting age citizens carry the tax burden and are more interested in the long term than teenagers would be, and that there are many other ways for students to get involved and participate in the process. So just wanted to make sure that we're aware that also rural schools as well as USBE have taken a position against this for those reasons. I do appreciate, though, that this is voluntary. There's another safeguard where local boards can decide whether to adopt this or not. But wanted to make sure that position was heard by the board.
Okay. Board Member Earl.
Can you just put my name down for a motion? I'll take my hand down here, but I just want to make a motion.
Okay. I had Board Member Hart on the motion list, and now Earl. We'll see how this works out. Vice Chair Belknap.
Hi, thank you. I have some concerns with this bill. And my concern is not what it could maybe teach our children and or preparing them, but I don't know if we've talked to the cities or counties. If they vote for this, the cost is going to be a lot more than the $17,000 that has been set aside for them to create additional ballots that are different than what other ballots are going out. There'll be a huge cost to the cities, and I don't know if they've had a chance to weigh in on that. And then I would reiterate the piece that Board Member Hanson stated, that there are other ways to get our children involved in the this republic and the opportunities to vote. Thank you.
Board Member Klein.
I just want to agree with Scott Hanson, and there are a lot of better ways that kids can get involved. They've got student government that they can vote in their own schools and get involved that way. And I do worry that there will be that voter manipulation. There's a lot of adults that don't get that aren't voting on their school board members that aren't educated as well, and we should be focusing on getting them actively involved persons. They do bear the weight of being the taxpayer. So I will not be voting for this.
I have one question for staff on this House Bill 338, and that is I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, anything. I can see how it would reflect our districts, but how does that affect our charter schools? I can't remember seeing anything about their board in this. Was there anything in there about their role in because I know there's appointments and that. Was there anything in there that you know of, Deputy Superintendent Stallings?
Chair, thank you. I don't think it would apply to charter schools because charter school board members are not elected. So all of the provisions that I can see in this bill are all in 20A, which is about election law. So I don't think it applies to our charter schools.
Thank you. And Board Member Klein, your hand's still raised. I don't know if you wanted it to stay up. Did you have another comment? Oh, okay. Board Member Booth.
I spoke to this while Dottie was with us, and so I will make this brief. I just think this is an opportunity for some local flexibility. If a school district chooses to use this approach as part of the education of their students and civil action and civil involvement, participation, I think it's a great opportunity. And those that don't choose to do it, they don't have to do it. But to say to a district, you can't do this when there seems to be some excitement and enthusiasm for it, I would love to let local control reign. And so that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay. Member Straight, your hand's raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This sort of reminds me of the bill we had a few years back on ranked choice voting, and it was done the same way. I know we had a presentation from one of our local representatives, state representatives, who presented that to us then. There is one caution I have as a teacher myself, a social studies teacher. We have to be super careful in regards to how we discuss elections, how we discuss things. And I could see this being a real fighting point between, well, this teacher supporting this candidate, or at least it being construed that way. So it would be nice to have some safeguards as to what is appropriate within the school as far as talking about the election of local school board members. That could be a really tough situation. I like the flexibility, but I see there are some dangers. I think it could be dealt with, and perhaps moving forward, there could be substitutes. So I like the concept, but I do see some challenges.
Member Hart.
Yeah, I have the same concerns. We are really putting teachers in difficult positions when now students are voting. It's not, I very much support involving them in the process. I'm just not sure this is exactly the way to do it. I'm concerned that we already have, issues and concerns about what may or may not be discussed in classrooms, and you're making the mountain even more steep for teachers at this point. I fully support getting students acclimated to voting, civic responsibilities. I'm just not sure we've considered what kinds of dynamics these set up in classrooms. I'm also concerned that the fiscal note is so low, and I don't necessarily know how. I'd like to hear a little bit more from voter clerks and offices about how that would all play out. There's so many unknowns. The theory's great. I'm just not sure this is how you get students involved in the process.
Member Earl, your hand's raised.
Yeah, I guess that maybe that dynamics also plays out. And I think maybe Member Hart just asked my questions for me, because you would need to go through some kind of a process for them to decide. And then from there, then the clerks would have to get involved, and boundaries as they are. I'm not sure exactly some of the other districts where they if they cross into different counties or different areas. Some of them are pretty clean and others are pretty messy. So there's just some interesting dynamics to that.
Right. Thank you. I don't see any hands, so I'm gonna call for this to get voted. See if we can get a couple more things in for our 2 o'clock. The motion before the board is to support House Bill 338, school district voter eligibility requirement. Board members, please vote at this time.
Chair Huntsman, Board Member Lear is trying to get back in. I don't know if she's been able to do that.
Well, let's watch.
She wants to vote on this one.
Well, we. Vice Chair Belknap, can you call her on your phone and I'll recognize her voice? Please.
Got it.
Okay, we're gonna have to do this all over again because I'm scanning. I'm trying to count the yes votes.
Maybe a roll call vote for this one.
I think we're gonna have to roll call it. Okay, this will be a roll call vote. Vice Chair Belknap.
No.
Vice Chair Davis.
No.
Board Member Earl.
No.
Member Hanson.
No.
Member Hymas.
No.
Member Straight.
No.
Member Lear. Did you get her?
Yes, I'm on Laura's phone. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. We'll
I
make
heard
it
you.
work.
Thanks, Carol.
Member Cannon.
Stay on.
Yes.
Member Hart.
No.
Member Klein.
No.
Member Moss is absent. Member Booth.
Yes.
Member Norton.
No.
Member Huntsman's a no. So our yeses, we have 1, 2. Then we have 3. Is that what you have?
Yes, 3. Lear, Cannon, and Booth.
Okay, the motion does not pass. Okay, Board Member Hart.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to support HB 381. That is the Grow Your Own Teacher and School Counselor pipeline. And in the interest of time, Deputy Superintendent Stallings or Director Thronson, can you summarize for us? I think you would be much better at that than I would.
Let's get a second before we get on the table.
Okay.
Second, Member Norton.
Okay. To speak to the motion, Deputy Superintendent Stallings, can you, I'm very familiar with it, but go ahead. Can you give a?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I'll try to do this briefly. And if Director Thronson needs to supplement or correct me, she is happy. I know she also knows a lot about this bill. What the bill would do is it would provide funding for the board to distribute funds to LEAs, districts and charter schools, to provide essentially scholarships or funding for students, paraprofessionals who've been in the classroom to become teachers, and then generally teachers to become school counselors. So it would pay for a portion of their schooling, and it would also pay for them to work in the district or charter school while they're getting their education. This has been modeled after a similar program that Davis School District has been doing. And if that's enough background for now, I'll stop there.
Speak to who the sponsor is and.
Oh, absolutely. It's Representative Jefferson Moss.
And can I speak to my motion now?
Yes.
Just as a point of information, I am a Grow Your Own principal product. I have participated in these programs and had the benefit of having employees that have benefited from these. And I think it's an incredible recruiting tool, much better than any other sort of marketing efforts. Our teacher ranks are dropping precipitously. People go into the field not understanding what they're getting into. That is different from our employees who are there and know and understand what's going on around them. I just cannot speak highly enough of growing our own employees from within our systems. It provides mentoring. It's just an excellent pathway to increase our ranks and have good quality teachers and counselors. I just fail to find negatives to this type of bill.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. The speaker spoke to the motion. Member Earl?
Yeah, I'm not noticing a fiscal note on this. Is this, I don't know if anyone can talk to that. What is the fiscal note? And I just had, I have questions on a couple things, but I do agree with this. I think there's some very beneficial grow your own programs that are going on in the state right now. And I think those that are involved in the schools are those that we want to help further their education. But it's looking like who's paying, I mean, some of the benefits that, I don't know, I'm just looking at the whole dynamics. This program would pay for some of the benefits of an employee. Anyways, there's some things there that I'm not sure of yet. I don't know if someone can answer those, what the funding cost is or how this will be taken into consideration.
Deputy Superintendent Stallings, can you speak to this, or should we have
Director Thronson?
Director Thronson for this one. Director Thronson.
Thank you, Board Chair. Director Jennifer Thronson, Teaching and Learning. For the fiscal note, we actually just worked on that this morning and got it done about 12:30. So that's why I haven't seen it just yet. It's about 9.7 million, I think, is where we ended. Basically 100 teachers every year going through the program and about 50 counselors between counselor assistants and master candidates. A couple different levels of getting those in their bachelor's program and counts in related fields to think of school counseling, and then moving into that master's program required for becoming a licensed counselor. So it covers tuition, licensing fees, assessment books, basically all those costs. And then when they're doing their student teaching or their intern, it also provides FTE, that the bill would provide a portion of that, and the LEAs would also provide a portion. As many of these paraprofessionals are employed already, this would allow them to continue receiving their funding, so they could do their student teaching time without losing that fiscal financial benefit of being able to be paid as a para. So the state funds would pay in a certain portion, and then the LEAs would also be responsible for covering another portion of their FTE during that semester of student teaching or interning.
Okay, so that's the clarifying there. Sorry, I hadn't seen this bill to go through it all the way yet, so that's why I was asking that. I did have another question, but now I can't remember what it is. So,
okay, Vice Chair, I'm just looking at the time, so I'll go quick. Vice Chair Belknap.
Yeah, mine's a quick one. Is this anywhere in the funding through PEA or anywhere in our funding schedule at this point?
No, it is not. It's meant to be a 3-year pilot program with one-time funds, is what Representative Moss and Senator Milner will be seeking.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Norton.
I took my hand down.
Okay, Member
They
Strickland.
covered up.
Oh, I'm not seeing that hand. I was just writing them down to here. Vice Chair Davis.
Yes, I support the concept, but $9 million is a big ticket item. Is there someone that could tell us? I think we still have some shortages in our teaching population. Are we experiencing shortages in our administrative and our counseling areas?
I can speak for that, Chair, if you.
Okay, please do.
So in principals, our data shows we don't have a shortage statewide. There are some rural areas that have more challenges than others, but in general, we actually have way more principals available with their degrees than positions open. For counseling, we have a shortage in school counselors. So this would help to meet the teacher and counselor shortages we're seeing.
Member Lear.
Yes, I think you said Lear. And thanks for your patience as I dealt with technology. I had a question similar to Board Member Davis's. I support the concept. I think it's a great idea. I'm concerned about the money also. So where would this money, is this money that we have already established priorities for? Would it come from things that we have said we wanted previously? Is this just found money? Can you help me with that? Somebody, Scott, Angie?
Deputy Superintendent Jones or Deputy Superintendent Stallings, one of the two of you.
I'd answer, Chair.
Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Yeah, I think with any appropriation, it's always competing, right? The appropriations are always competing with each other. So at the end of the day, because this is funded, something else might not get funded. I did hear, I believe, Jennifer mentioned that it looks like it will be one-time funding as opposed to ongoing. I don't know if that makes a difference to you, but that means that if it's one-time funding, it's not likely competing with the WPU, for example.
And a follow-up briefly, Chair.
Yes.
Did Representative Moss, Senator Milner have ideas about what they would not fund and would fund this?
Chair, is that okay if I answer? I don't think that was ever a discussion that they had with staff. It was more administrative input that we provided on how the bill could work, not strategy of whether this would be funded over something else.
And that's my only reluctance. I think this sounds like an innovative idea. I know it worked well in Cache County also, and they've been doing something similar for at least a decade. So I think it has great possibilities, and I'm in favor of new ideas. I am just concerned that I don't want it to take away from the intensive services, for instance. I am concerned about where the money would not go if it went to this. Thanks.
Okay. Vice Chair Belknap, your hand's raised.
Yeah, sorry. I'm feeling very torn and frustrated with this bill that we didn't have opportunity to go through it before, because I think some more clarity would have been helpful. Also, Davis has been doing this for years, and I don't know if Cache is the same, but they've been doing it with donated money, that people in the community have been donating money to help grow their own. And so that's a very different look than the trade out for one thing that's something else that we haven't had opportunity to vet yet. So I'm frustrated with that.
There is an opportunity to make a motion to postpone until our next.
Well, I would like to do that, but I don't know if it'll be accepted, but I would like the opportunity to postpone this discussion for more details.
I would second that with the provision. I'd like to know from the sponsors what they would suggest cutting, and $9 million isn't pocket change.
Chair, as the maker of the motion, can I have a point of order?
Yes.
I believe that I heard that Mr. Moss will be joining us next week, maybe? Is that, so if that is truly the case, then I would like to withdraw my motion and we can wait until we hear from him.
Without objection, without going through a whole bunch of process here, because the chair certainly can do this, is, and your second's still good with withdrawing it. Without objection, let's withdraw this motion. I think it's.
Does that mean that I can also?
Okay, Lorraine?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Then can I also ask that it be addressed next week?
It can
Is that
be
possible?
It will be on the list.
Great, thank you.
And I also I was under the understanding that he was going to visit us. I don't know, I can't confirm it, but I know he wanted to speak to this. So
great.
Okay, we're out of time. We do have two hands raised. I don't know if these are kind of requests to have something come back to our next meeting, but are you good, Board Member Earl? Okay. Board Member Lear, your hand's raised.
Oops, yes, I would like to discuss HB 382 at a future meeting. We mentioned it, but I'd like more discussion of it. Thank you.
So because of those requests, you might be receiving something prior to our meeting. And anytime anyone has any questions on any of these bills as they're being moved forward, we do have staff that definitely will help update you on progress and as things are moving forward. Want to thank the board members for your attendance today and the work that you have done and in your willingness to serve. I want to give a shout out to staff for help making this happen and the preparation, and also our public that's followed along with this meeting. And I hope all can take care and be safe and have a great week, and we'll be meeting soon. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
take care.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy the snow.
Hi, everyone.